Forgiveness is one of the most powerful lessons found in the Bible, a challenging practice yet essential for spiritual growth and inner peace. Today, let's dive into one of the most moving stories about forgiveness and how it teaches us to open our hearts to others. Throughout the Gospels, Jesus speaks of forgiveness as a core commandment, showing that forgiving is not just a choice but a path to living in peace with others and ourselves. But what does this really mean? How can we apply this lesson? To understand, we need to go back to the time of Jesus and revisit the famous story of the Prodigal Son. There once was a very wealthy man who owned vast lands and properties. He had 2 sons, and one day the younger son decided to ask for his inheritance in advance. He wanted to leave home and live as he pleased, free from any rules or responsibilities. With a heavy heart, the father agreed, dividing his fortune and giving the younger son his share. Shortly after, the son embarked on a long journey to a distant land, determined to live life without limitations. For a time, he enjoyed what he believed to be a life of freedom and happiness. But, without considering the consequences, the young man quickly spent his fortune. Soon, he found himself penniless, friendless, and without hope. Hunger set in, and with no one left by his side, he found himself forced to work feeding pigs, a despised job in his culture. As he looked at the pigs' food, even considering eating it, he reflected on his choices and remembered how he was treated at home, where even his father's servants lived better than he did at that moment. At that point, he made a hard decision. He would go back. He decided to ask his father's forgiveness, admitting his mistakes and recognizing that he didn't deserve to be treated as a son. Maybe his father would give him a place as a servant, and that would be enough. While he was still far away, his father saw him and, in a surprising gesture, ran to meet his son. Even before hearing words of remorse, the father embraced him, full of compassion and love. The son began to apologize, but the father interrupted him. He called for his servants and ordered them to bring new clothes and prepare a great feast to celebrate the return of the lost son. Instead of punishment, the father offered acceptance, showing that true forgiveness doesn't wait for explanations, it simply loves. But not everyone was happy with this decision. The elder brother, who had always stayed by his father's side, working and being obedient, felt wronged. He couldn't understand why his father forgave the younger son so quickly and treated him so generously. The father then calmly explained that although the younger son had made mistakes, he was lost and was now found. "All that I have is yours," the father told the elder son, "but we need to celebrate, for your brother was dead and is now alive. He was lost and is now found." The father wanted both sons to understand that love and forgiveness are essential to unite and restore. This story reveals the essence of forgiveness in the Bible. It's not just about excusing another's wrongs, but about embracing others and showing compassion, even when we feel wronged. Just as the father forgave the son and welcomed him back, we are invited to do the same. Forgiveness restores, unites, and frees us from resentment. It allows us to move forward without carrying the weight of bitterness, bringing peace to our hearts and opening doors for healing. Now, the question remains for each of us. Are we ready to forgive? Can we take that step and let go of resentments? Remember, forgiveness is not a feeling. It's a choice, an action. Forgiveness is one of the most transformative acts we can practice, yet it's also one of the most difficult. In the Bible, it's more than a gesture. It reflects God's unconditional love for us. In stories like the Prodigal Son, we are invited to draw closer to this divine wisdom. Can we forgive others with the same generosity that God offers us? To better understand the depth of this story, we need to revisit the cultural and social context of that time. In Jesus' day, asking for an inheritance while the father was still alive was an extreme act of disrespect. It was like saying, "To me, you're dead." Such a request would have shocked Jesus' listeners, making the father's response even more remarkable. Yet, despite his hurt, the father grants his son's request without a word of judgment. This act of respect and freedom teaches us something fundamental. Forgiveness begins when we acknowledge that we cannot force others to act according to our expectations. True love grants freedom, even if it may result in pain, from his essence, his family, and above all, his Father's unconditional love. Meanwhile, the Father had not given up on his Son. Without knowing if or when he would return, he waited. Here, forgiveness begins even before the Son's return. The Father had already forgiven him in his heart, and this is essential to understand Jesus' message. Forgiveness is an act that springs from within, regardless of the other's actions. When he saw his Son from afar, the Father didn't hesitate. In an unusual gesture for the customs of the time, he ran to meet his Son. In that culture, men of his age and position didn't run, as it was seen as undignified. But the Father put love above conventions. He ran because the love he felt for his Son was stronger than pride or tradition. That embrace was the symbol of complete forgiveness. The Father welcomed his Son not as an inferior or a repentant servant, but as someone who had never ceased to be part of his family. The Father's love is unconditional, and forgiveness is the living proof of that love. The elder brother is important to understanding what forgiveness is not. He represents those who follow the rules, who fulfill duties and thus expect recognition and privilege. Upon seeing his father's treatment of the younger brother, he feels wronged. In response to the elder brother's words, the father offers a second lesson. Son, all that I have is yours. With this, he not only reaffirms his love but reminds us that forgiveness is not about justice, it's about mercy. Forgiving does not mean ignoring the wrongs but looking beyond them and seeing the worth of each person as a loved being. The elder brother represents our own difficulty in forgiving those who, in our view, don't deserve it. But true forgiveness doesn't wait for merit. It is an act of grace, and this is the essence of God's love. This parable is more than a story. It's an invitation to reflect on our own lives. Who among us does not carry wounds, resentments, and memories of mistakes, whether from others or ourselves? The forgiveness the Father offers the prodigal son challenges us to set aside our pride and seek reconciliation. Forgiveness is a process. Often it starts within us before the other even apologizes. It's an act that frees us, allowing us to leave behind the weight of bitterness. And in practice, it's not easy. But each small step toward forgiveness is a step toward inner peace and personal growth. The story of the prodigal son is the story of each of us. We are called to be like the Father, offering forgiveness and unconditional love. But we are also the prodigal son, seeking reconciliation and recognition. The great lesson is that God's love knows no limits, and as He forgives us, we must forgive one another. Now I ask, who is the prodigal son in your life? And are you ready to take a step toward forgiveness? Reflect on that. Share your thoughts in the comments, and remember that forgiveness is a path to peace. If this story touched your heart and brought reflections, don't hesitate to share it with someone who needs to hear this message. Subscribe to the channel for more inspiring stories, and let us know your thoughts on the power of forgiveness. Until next time, may peace be with you.